Hello everyone, this is TC Furlong from TC Furlong Inc. I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar featuring James Stoffo. As mentioned previously, in case you weren't on a couple minutes ago, for our Chicago area attendees or anyone else who wants to travel to Chicago on November 8th, we're hosting the Seminar Digital 9000 Launch Tour. We're holding two events, one in the morning at Intelligent Lighting Creations in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and one in the evening at Atwood Cafe in downtown Chicago, corner of State and Washington. Sennheiser reps will be on hand demoing the new Digital 9000 system. For more information or to register for either event, visit TC Furlong's website /digital9000. No spaces. It's www.tcfurlong.com/digital9000. Now I'd like to take a minute and recognize our presenter today, who's James Stoffo. James is a wonderful RF expert. I'd say that some would argue the RF expert. But first, before introducing James, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to attend our webinar. We plan to do more of these regularly in coming months, including an upcoming webinar on AVB, audio-video bridging. So stay tuned to your email announcements or to the TC Furlong Facebook page for more event announcements of this type. Just a little history about TC Furlong Inc. for those who aren't familiar with us and are attending the webinar today. We've been in business for just under 40 years. We've been providing wireless systems for, I calculated it this morning, 23 years. So we've got a little over a couple decades of experience providing wireless microphones, wireless production equipment. We're dealers for all major manufacturers of wireless equipment. In our inventory currently in rental, we have over 150 channels of microphones, IEMs, IFBs, and intercom. Today, RF guru James Stoffo is joining us and presenting a wonderful presentation that we've done. A little of James's history is that he founded Professional Wireless Systems. His credits include many Super Bowls, All-Star games, award shows, the World Cup. It goes on and on and on, including major broadcast originations. James has even worked with us on a number of things. I know James has some great stuff in store for us today, so let's get started. Mr. James Stoffo, say hello to our TC Furlong webinar participants.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, TC. Thanks, Michael and Jeff, and anybody at TC Furlong and Company that had a hand in putting together this extremely timely webinar today. The reason I say that it's very timely is because as wireless microphone and intercom operators, in-ear monitor, IFB, we'll call them wireless audio devices, and that really affect every aspect of American culture. We are in a 5-year period right now, which is going to present, has presented, and will continue to present greater challenges to the wireless microphone and intercom user than in any 5-year period in the history of radio on this planet, on the planet Earth. And that's a pretty strong statement. So if we could take a peek here and see what I'm talking about, let's take a look at where wireless mics and televisions has operated since its invention here on the planet Earth, because we do share wireless microphones, intercoms, in-ear monitors, all share spectrum and always have shared spectrum with television broadcasters. So chances are if you use wireless mics or intercoms regularly, that your frequencies fall within the spectrum that you see here. Now, the reason why I say that the 5-year period that we are right in the middle of will present greater challenges than in the history of radio on this planet, which is not too much older than about 100 years or so since our forefathers began to play with radio. However, we have ended up in this band, and if we in particular take a look at the UHF band, because that's where the majority of wireless microphones and intercoms operate in the United States, and if you have in-ear monitors as part of your setup, you certainly more than likely operate in the frequencies between 470 and until 2.5 years ago, you were able to go all the way up to 806 megahertz. However, just about 2.5 years ago, the FCC implemented what we called our 700 meg auction, as you may have all heard. It's actually 698 meg and above. And with that auction, American culture and the wireless microphones that operate therein lost fully 1/3 of the spectrum that we've had since 1962, when the first wireless microphones were used in production. And that happened to be at the time Mutiny on a Bounty with Marlon Brando. It was a production in 61, 62, and they used 6 Vega wireless microphones to make that production back then. And don't ask me how I know these things. But actually, I did have the opportunity to sit down with the sound man that mic'd up Marlon Brando and put the long wire antenna in the ruffles on his costume. And ever since then, wireless has grown rampant in the United States and has affected every aspect of American culture, from churches to television broadcasts to college football to professional football to basketball to Broadway theater to Cirque du Soleil's in Vegas. And pretty much you cannot turn around and turn on a television show or watch any arts and entertainment performance without knowing that somewhere, either on stage or backstage, there are just a ton of wireless microphones in use. So the technology really does affect all of American culture, which means that it affects us because we help implement some of that culture, whether you work at a church or a Broadway theater. And the focus of this next 40 minutes or so is to enlighten you as to what has happened, what's going to happen, what plans the FCC has for what we have called home since 1962. So here you can see that the first thing that happened was, as you look at this graph in front of you, at least in the UHF band above channel 14, we've lost 33% of that spectrum and already are now forced to operate into less than 2/3 of the spectrum that we had just 2.5 years ago. I'm going to go back a little bit further in time, and let's take a look at what happened first, which was the introduction of digital television and how that relates to what the analog used to be that we operated in. Michael, if you can get us there. What you're looking at here is clearly the faceplate of a radio spectrum analyzer. We're looking at a 42 meg chunk, and we're looking at 4 digital television stations and 3 analog stations. Now, before the introduction of digital TV, we were able to use active analog TV stations, not entirely legally, mind you, but we were able to nestle 1 or 2 microphones inside what we called slot frequencies, which is the frequency that you see. There's a large spike, which is the video carrier. There's some color burst happening, and then way at the top end of each of those little 6 meg chunks of analog, there was the FM stereo sound carrier, and we were able to nestle a few mics in there. Well, that opportunity is gone now. We have no more real analog to speak of, and we are fully digital. That happened just in a couple of years ago as well. So in addition to the 33% of spectrum that we had lost due to the 700 meg auction, we also lost the ability to nestle a few extra mics if we needed them into analog. The digital carrier takes up an entire 6 meg chunk, and there simply is no room to take advantage of nestling. There's no more nestling of wireless microphones within active carriers. Now let's take a look at where we're going next, because what you're about to see here is a news release, and this isn't a release on what may happen or theoretically could possibly happen. The news release that you're looking at is history. It has already been passed, and the FCC will be implementing, along with the television band digital device manufacturers, over the next couple of years. So that 40% or so that we've lost is just the tip of the iceberg. We're in the middle of this 5-year transition period that I told you would represent greater challenges to us than any other time in the history of wireless mics and, in fact, radio on the planet. So let's take a quick look at this. This, if you notice, was written about 2 years ago, this release, I should say. The FCC has taken steps to free up vacant airwaves between television channels called white spaces to unleash a host of new technologies. Okay, let me debunk something right off the bat. There is no such thing as white spaces. At this point in time, when this release was written in 2010, the spaces that are between television channels have already been used by wireless microphones and intercoms and in-ear monitors and IFB systems. There are no such thing as white spaces. If you're lucky, you have gray spaces, and in my case, on events that I'm asked to work, They are very cold, dark side of the moon spaces. So I will not refer to this band as white space. We'll call it the television band devices, not white spaces, because there is no such thing. There was never white spaces ever since the FCC began to look at this band and talk to technology providers, which will be manufacturing and putting on the retail market over the next couple of years, portable and fixed, what they're calling white space devices. Well, long before that, we had occupied that band, and in the case of a Super Bowl, there might be over 1,000 wireless microphones in these empty channels. Believe me, that's not white space or an unused space. Let's read on here. Second paragraph. TV white space spectrum is considered prime real estate because its signals travel well, making it ideally suited for mobile wireless devices. That's a great idea. That's probably why wireless microphones chose to go there in 1962. So we've been using this band for 50 years already for the very exact reasons that the new technology device manufacturers have lobbied the FCC to grab this band, and guess what? They have grabbed it. This is not a what if or some theory or somebody scratching out on a cocktail napkin in a bar. What you're looking here is a done deal. This is a release, and it will begin to take effect over the next 2 years. And according to my contacts, we will certainly begin to see, fixed devices have already begun to light off on the East Coast, and we'll see portable devices before the end of next year. So that gives us about a year to start to get used to this new spectrum that we'll be operating in for the first time since the invention of wireless audio devices for production and worship over in the United States. So let's just review real quick on what I've just said before we hop into what's about to happen. If you take a look here, what you're seeing is, yes, June 12th, just about 2.5 years ago, we've lost our ability to operate wireless mics above 698 meg. Hello, we just lost 33%, fully 1/3, and more than that when you include the fact that we have digital television instead of analog television, so we can no longer attempt to operate inside of those bands. And a digital television carrier, just like a white space device, does take up the better part of a 6 meg chunk. So when these devices come into your venue and are sitting in the audience, you'll essentially have a miniature DTV station, or 50,000 of them, depending on your venue. The Rose Bowl seats 90,000 people. So anyone that you know of that has a smartphone now, probably these will be white space devices. White space, I'm sure, will double as phones, because I can't see anybody carrying around 2 portable devices that isn't already doing so because of the technical part of their job. So here we've lost 33%. We're going to talk about how to best maximize our chances for success, because this is the the 600-pound gorilla. We're not going to stop technology companies from introducing product. If you put together the entire budgets for the top manufacturers in wireless audio in the country, which would include Shure, Sennheiser, Electrosonics, Telex, HME, Clearcom, you name it, AKG, Audio-Technica, sorry if I missed anybody. You add up everybody's annual budget, and chances are it's probably equivalent to less than a toilet paper budget for a large technology company. So we really don't have a choice. These are the new rules. We have to make our equipment work and do our best and work harder to ensure that we will succeed and that our productions and events will be successful. So we're going to talk about some strategies there. In the short term, yes, relief from analog TV. As you saw a couple of graphs ago, we lost a little bit of spectrum when we were actually, not too long ago, we had parallel carriers, digital TV and analog. So that graph you saw was a real live display of that time when we had parallel carriers. Analogs have been turned off, so yes, we have some relief. Possible TV band interference from these new devices coming out. That's my opinion. We'll talk about what the FCC feels and how I feel, and I'll give you what I think is a realistic view of how you can protect your venue and your operations from these devices. So let's talk about what exactly are these devices. What is all of this about? Well, the television rules, in fact, if we can get to the next graph here, and I want to thank the FCC. We sat on the AES panel last year. We had an AES white space panel, essentially, put together by Henry Cohen, and Ira Keltz from the FCC came and sat on the panel. Very nice gentlemen, and the FCC is doing what they can. They go to Broadway theater too. They worship. They go to shows and they watch television. So I doubt that there's anyone in the FCC twirling their thumbs, hoping that all of American culture gets destroyed by these new digital devices, regardless of how much money they're going to bring into the economy. And I want to thank Ira and the FCC for allowing me to use the next couple of graphs you'll see. These are directly from the FCC and their description of white space devices. And I'd also like to thank Edgar Ryle and Mark Bruner from Shure for reviewing this presentation for technical accuracy. I certainly want to ensure that everything I put out is technically accurate. And if there's something I say that doesn't sit well with you, please send in the email or the question now, and let's try to get to the bottom of it. We'll also have at the end of this, I'll give my contact information. And I always look forward to emails, and I always do answer technical questions and other emails. And if there's any information that wasn't accurate, I will correct that. So here what we see, these rules were adopted, as you see here in 08, although the comment period and the debate back and forth between technology companies and wireless audio companies, including broadcasters, because they use a ton of wireless as well. Broadway had a coalition. There are over 1,000 wireless mics just in a 3-block radius around Broadway. NBC New York, the 3-block radius around NBC, has over 1,000 wireless. If you look at a theme park, Disney World, or what have you, there are over 1,000 wireless mics and comms in Disney World. Film production studios in Los Angeles, you name it. The NBA has over 500 RF microphones on an all-star game in one venue. And let's not even get into the ENG crews and so forth. So this truly does affect all of American culture. And I would really like to throw out kudos again to Shure for providing the leadership that they did. I dare say that if it weren't for Shure's leadership and guys like Mark Bruner, who called me up, and Edgar Ryle, and asked me and a bunch of other people to go and implore the FCC to take a look at this. I mean, before this television ban debate began, the FCC assumed that there were roughly 1,000 wireless microphones in use in the United States. Well, we know today that there are well over 2 million devices. Now, the reason they thought that was because that there are around 1,000 licenses, and they were all belonged to broadcasters. No one else really needed to go out and get a license. I shouldn't say didn't need to, that they weren't eligible to go out and get a license. I didn't have an FCC license for my equipment, and I know a lot of sound companies and churches and maybe even some smaller film production people don't have FCC licenses. So what the FCC perceived as a number of wireless mics in the U.S. was very small in when you relate it to the reality of that there were over 2,000 times that amount. So they thought, well, you know what, hey, we could generate some money in the United States by bringing in this digital technology. And it was really Shure's leadership that brought us all in to talk to congressional offices, Senate offices, and yes, even the FCC. And because of that, we as unlicensed wireless users have some rights to spectrum that we never had until this report and order came out, because this is all a byproduct of what you see here, this docket number 04186. This primarily is concerned, however, with these TV band devices. They were, as you can see, point number 2, allows the operation of unlicensed fixed and personal portable devices to operate on unused frequencies in the TV band. Well, there again, there aren't that many unused frequencies. We're already using those frequencies for mics and ears and comms. However, the plan is that these Wi-Fi, super Wi-Fi devices and portable smartphones will begin to hit the market and be introduced within the same band where wireless mics operate. Just like any other cell phone, it has a geolocation capability, so it can be programmed over the air. And devices must access a database to obtain a list of permitted channels, which is great news because, as you'll see here in a moment, you will have the opportunity to upload your frequency chunks, and that should theoretically instruct the portable white space, or I'm sorry, TV band devices that are in your audience or in your congregation if you're a church, then these devices are theoretically supposed to stay off of the 6 meg chunks that you have requested from these database administrators that work through the FCC as a liaison. The bottom point there, rules provide protection for many services, include licensed and unlicensed wireless microphones. That's the part that I really need to give the FCC kudos here, because they have acknowledged that, yes, there are more than 1,000 wireless mics. There are more like 2 million. They are used in every aspect of American culture, and our job is really to protect American culture, not to destroy it. And so that last point down there actually gives unlicensed users some teeth in the bite. It basically allows you to operate a wireless mic, whereas 5, 6, 7 years ago, as a church, you weren't legally allowed to operate a wireless. There are large theme parks that will not be named here that were fined tens of thousands of dollars because they were using wireless microphones, and that was their only offense. Well, the FCC has now made that legal for all of us, and so no one should have a problem now with contacting the FCC on behalf of American culture. Before, lots of people were afraid to call the FCC or email the FCC or file a complaint or against a comment. Well, there's no reason for that anymore, because we are all now legitimate users of wireless. If we are unlicensed, we have to follow certain rules. If we're licensed, we get a little different rules, because that generally means we're broadcasters. In fact, let's take a look at this next. What is the difference between wireless and unlicensed wireless microphones? If you look at this wireless mic overview, there are essentially 2 types of wireless microphones, users, I should say, because they are the same wireless. Whether you're using a 50 milliwatt Shure or a Sennheiser, it's going to be the same device. It's just whose hands do you place this device in. And in this case, a licensed wireless microphone permitted under, it's called Part 74. Generally, you have to be a television broadcaster or a motion picture person making a film that could later be shown on broadcast. So the bottom line is you are a licensed wireless microphone, or it's most easy to obtain a license if you are in the broadcast business or produce videos that could be used for later broadcast. The unlicensed wireless microphones, which is the bottom half of that page, well, that's the rest of us. That is everybody on Broadway, all of the shows in Vegas, whether it's a Cirque du Soleil or another show, theme parks, pretty much anybody but broadcasters, churches, lots and lots of groups, sporting events, college football. This all falls under unlicensed wireless microphones. So when we start to talk about registration and protection for wireless microphones, you'll want to pay particular attention to the unlicensed portion that we're talking about. So let's take a look about where exactly unlicensed wireless microphones, how we register, and if you even need to register first. And if you go ahead and give me another couple of clicks, what this is showing here is where television band digital devices are authorized to operate. Okay, I'm looking at this from the unlicensed wireless microphone perspective. And Michael, go ahead and give me another 2 or 3 clicks, because what you see is since we are now all not quite on par with broadcasters, but we have some rights, whereas before we had absolutely none. In fact, unlike broadcasters, which fall under Part 74 rules, we fall under, as unlicensed users, Part 15 rules. So if you're really, really bored, look up Part 15 on the FCC code, which you can get online. Well, that's us. And what that means is that we need to navigate around these television band devices. We must accept interference from them, which obviously we don't want, so we want to avoid them instead. And most of the protection is down in the low and high VHF band. Not that there's any equipment available down there in channel 2, 3, and 4. However, if you look down there, no portable devices, the ones that really have people at Shure and Sennheiser and Broadway Theater and any large venue, game operations person, the portable devices are what has us concerned, because they will be right inside of the venue with us. I have award shows like a whether it's an Oscars or a Mexican billboard show where a host may have to go out into the audience and do a camera shot. Well, those days may be coming to an end because we have to now block the audience from our event because they are transmitting within the same band on the same frequencies. So we have to do what we can to minimize that interference and noise floor generated by these very wideband devices. But in general, let's take a look at this. You can see that let's look at 5 and 6, for example. Television 5 in this city, where this graph is depicting here, Channel 5 has a television broadcast station. So that means that the fixed device, the television band devices which are going to be introduced here and are being introduced right now, are not allowed to operate adjacent to any active television station, which is now, of course, digital television. So in this case, let's say you had to run 6 or 8 IFB systems. That stands for interrupt fallback, and that's where you have a host on camera with a coily cord in their ear, and they're hearing program, and the director can interrupt and send them commands like, okay, we're going on in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, well, it just turns out that there's a company called Comtech, you may have heard of them, and they manufacture hardware, IFBs, down in that TV channel 5 and 6 area. So that might be a great place to put your wireless IFB or any type of link that involves program without extremely high audio quality, because these are not in-ear monitors. So we take a look at TV 5 and 6. There's an active channel 5. That means that channel 6 is open. Hang on, I'm getting a note here. All right. So if you look up into the higher band VHF, channel 7 through 13, same thing holds true. If there's an active television station, then the adjacent 6 meg chunks, and 6 meg only, must remain vacant from fixed television band devices. So what you're looking at there, that red circle with the line through it, that's where you cannot operate television band devices, which means it's a great place for us to start looking at operating wireless microphones, intercoms, IFBs, and other devices that we're talking about here today. Other available channels, let's go all the way up there to 512 meg, for example, because up in the UHF band, portable white space devices are not authorized to operate above 512 meg. So all you'll run into below that would be fixed devices, and they have to follow the same rules. So if we take channel 14 through 19, for example, you'll see that there's an active TV 14. That means that the TV channel 15 may be a good idea to park a few wireless, because fixed television band devices are not authorized to be there because it's adjacent to 14. Same with channel 19. There's an active TV 19. So that means that channel 18 and channel 20 are probably good places to look at operating some wireless microphones. Now, once we get above 512 megahertz, or TV channel 21, we have a slightly different set of issues here. Now, TV 21, that's 512, actually TV 21 to 51, white space portable devices will be authorized to operate up in that spectrum. So here's where my concern is that if you have dozens, if not tens of thousands of these consumer devices, which are wideband, and they're sitting in close proximity to each other in an audience, they will very well be able to create intermods and at the very least increase the noise floor of that entire band. However, the FCC has given us 2 channels, 2 6 meg chunks, to enable your entire event to work in, up there above TV 21. That's above 512 meg. We have 2 protected channels. The rest of that entire band may be used, and more than likely will be inundated with white space, with TV band portable devices, which will be sitting right in your venue in front of your stage. The 2 channels that are reserved for wireless microphones and intercoms and IFBs and in-ear monitors up there are the first available channel, the 6 meg TV chunk, below TV 37 in your city, and it will vary city to city, and above TV 37 in your city. So really, above channel 21, you are guaranteed 12 meg to operate all of your UHF systems. Now, the next thing you can do is you can apply for protection through FCC database administrators. But in order to do that, you must absolutely first attest that you have pursued every other means practicable outside of this protected band. That means that you use the 2 6 meg chunks above and below channel 37 if they're available. That means that if you use IFB systems and you can go out and purchase Comtex down in the TV 5 and 6 band, that you've done so. And I believe that the FCC will keep a very close watch on how we use or abuse these database administrators, because that's going to pretty much be the basis for further reallocation going down the line. We're looking at here wireless microphone registration. We do have some protection from TVBDs, and I hope that it all works the way that the FCC proposes that it will, and that the white space administrators hope that it will. These protected areas and times are very specific. As a matter of fact, you have to give them your latitude and longitude, your schedule, and what 6 meg chunks that you intend to use, and for what length of time you intend to use them. If you're a permanent install, like a church or a show in Vegas, let's say, like a cirque, you can register all of your wireless microphones for up to a year. They must be re-registered after that year. However, you are afforded some protection, assuming that you have pursued every other means practicable, which includes 470 to 512 megahertz in the UHF band, and 174 to 216, which is TV channel 7 through 13, and of course low band VHF where possible. You have to justify the number of TV channels that you're using, and the FCC will qualify your registrants for location. If we take a look at the next graph here, again, you do have to sign your life away and say, yes, I have pursued every other piece of equipment that I could find out there to do my job, and I still need more space. I still need another 6 meg to fit another 6 or 10 mics, or I still need another 12 meg. So you're asking for chunks of spectrum, and we're also going to talk here about how to protect those 6 meg chunks even when you have all of these wireless microphones, these wireless TV band devices out there. Okay, let's talk a bit about different types of modulation, because up to this point in time, pretty much all of the wireless microphones that have been sold in the United States from 1962 till just recently have used a technique called frequency modulation. And now frequency modulation, though it sounds great, you know, it's got its quirks, which we'll talk about here in a moment also. But the fact of the matter is, the point in time that we are now, we need to start thinking about more spectrally efficient products. We need to think about minimizing the footprint of every single wireless mic and every single intercom and in-ear monitor, because we're running out of space. So if you have to somehow deploy the same amount of wireless systems out there, but you're doing it with quite a bit less amount of space. In fact, we're already down 40%, and I think we're going to be down less than 4% in the UHF spectrum in particular. I think I quoted 3.6% when we talked about this webinar. FM is extremely spectrally inefficient method of modulation. Not only is there an occupied bandwidth issue, however, the RF amplifier circuits are fairly nonlinear, so we have to pay particular attention to intermod distortion and the blending of wireless microphones that are on stage next to each other, creating phantom transmit signals which can create interference onto other devices like in-ears, like other microphones, and like your very own intercoms. In fact, generally after I do an RF setup, I find that any interference is self-generated, and that if I just look within to my own operations, I can fix the problem without having to run out and search for interference from an external source. So what we have here is you take a look, you can see that the way we modulate RF, very briefly here, is you have a carrier wave, which is going to be up around like 5 to 698 megahertz, and you're going to modulate it with your audio signal. Could be carry underwood stinging on a mic. And there's a component in there called a modulator. And how we go about whether we vary the frequency or the amplitude is what modulation technique is all about. Well, if you use frequency modulation, you're going to take that one very thin carrier and cause it to deviate up and down off of its center frequency to the point that the receiver may need 300 to 400 kilohertz of window to be able to process all of that information on that carrier. In fact, let's take a look at what an FM signal looks like briefly here. What you're looking at here is one of those spikes is our primary FM carrier wave. Once we begin to modulate that carrier, what happens is the frequency actually deviates up and down as many as, well, up to, I've seen over 200 kilohertz, although it's not entirely legal. I've seen over 200 kilohertz modulation on FM systems. So we want to reduce that footprint because employing other methods of modulation, instead of packing maybe 10 wireless microphones into a 6 meg chunk, by employing other methods of modulation, we can pack dozens, if not hundreds, of wireless. And at the point we're in now where we're talking about spectral efficiency, we need to start to really look at the world from the receiver's perspective, and we need to start pay attention on how we can employ and deploy as many systems with taking up as little a footprint as possible so we can thereby pack more systems into less spectrum. That's where we're at. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because on the receive side of things, there are some tricks you can play that will increase your chances for success and decrease the noise floor. But the only way that you're going to be able to do that is if you begin to look at your setup from the receiver's perspective. I'll give you an example. If you're a wireless microphone, well, the transmitter's on stage and the receiver is back in a grid somewhere backstage. But if you're an in-ear monitor system, your receiver is out on stage in the middle of a bunch of Verilites and Versatubes and all sorts of potentially interfering equipment onto the in-ear. So the way to approach any installation and any setup and any design, whether you do it once and it stays for a year or whether you move from city to city, is to always think about the world, the RF realm, from the receiver's perspective. Now, in particular to how we can protect ourselves a little better from these white space devices, there are some accessories that you can use. If we can take a look at one of those anyway. What you're looking at here, they're very narrow, high Q, brick wall filters. And these filters they're 6 megahertz wide. They could be tuned anywhere throughout the UHF band. In fact, you can get these pre-tuned. I'm not on commission from this company, but they're really a good set of tools to have. It's called Microwave Filter out of Syracuse, New York, and they are absolutely 6 meg wide brick wall filters. So I recommend that you take a look at your installation, you look at what city you're operating in, and you get 2 of these, one for the frequency band below TV37 and one for the frequency band above TV37. The first available, I should say. So let's say you have an open TV36 and a 38 in your city. Well, you can now block out all of the RF noise that will be generated by these TV band devices, and this will be your first line of defense on your microphone receiver side by installing these filters between your antenna, your receiver antenna, and the core equipment or the first RF amplifier that happens to be in line. If you use a line amp, then you need to filter before you go to that line amp, and this will afford you some additional protection And again, you can email me and I'll get you info on these. Let's further take a look at an RF spectrum band plan, because that's where the real magic happens. Here's where we really get to spread out all of the devices that we have to operate, and that we're asked to operate, whether they're microphones, IFBs, intercoms, in-ear monitor systems. The name of the game really is to keep the noise floor on those receivers as low as possible. And it's a pretty realistic band. Really, the point is that if there's equipment available in a certain spectrum and it gets you away from where portable white space devices are authorized to operate, then that should be goal number one. So here we've, in this particular spectrum, I've used the 72 to 86 meg, that's TV5 and 6 for the context. 174 to 216, there are ENG wireless microphones out there, still some VHF mics available, and we'll keep our eyes open on the next couple of months going forward. I'm sure we'll begin to see professional wireless manufacturers fabricating equipment in these bands, because we're running out of spectrum in UHF. Let's take a quick look at the UHF band, though, and see how this is divided up to maximize your chances for success, to minimize your noise floor. Here, in this case, I've taken 470 to 500 meg, and I'm parking wireless microphones and intercom-based receivers there. That's because these devices are looking for microvolts of energy, and we want to keep the noise floor as clean as possible down there and not stick an in-ear monitor right in the middle of the band, or 8 in-ear monitors on a combiner, which is now radiating multiple watts of power within this band, where this equipment is looking for microvolts of energy. So we have 470, 500. This isn't the band for everybody. It's just an example of how you should spectrum band plan based on the RF splits of equipment that you own. In this case here again, 5 to 600 meg, that's where I generally put my higher power base station units. That includes intercoms, because on the events I work, more than half of the frequencies are wireless intercom. So every bit of that 5 to 600 meg will be taken up by in-ear monitors and wireless intercom base transmits, also IFB transmits. Anything that is a plug-in transmitter goes in a separate band than the plug-in receivers. As you can see, from 600 to 698, we put the wireless mics and intercom-based receivers. So here's just a general band plan that will assist you in having clean audio. By the way, the cleaner the band, the lower the noise floor over the microphones. Guess what? The better range you get and the better audio quality you get, particularly when you're talking about frequency modulated product. So there's a couple of good reasons to band plan. In addition to band planning, the days of just tossing out generalized RF frequencies and keeping your fingers crossed are long gone. RF used to be very forgiving. However, where we're at now in time, you're going to have to crunch more and more wireless into a smaller band, and so you'll need the additional tool of some type of a math coprocessor to jumble your numbers. We're talking about millions of calculations. Even if you only have a dozen or 2 dozen systems, you're still looking at hundreds of thousands of calculations to do this. This software that you're looking at now is from Professional Wireless, written by a good technician named Jason Eskew. In fact, I think we were still working out of my family room at Professional Wireless when Jason and I sat out by the pool and had a barbecue, and Jason plugged out what is probably the most useful program that I get to use all day. And it has a list of all of the manufacturers' hardware and their splits. PWS isn't the only software, I should say, though IAS, it sure has it, Sennheiser. Most manufacturers now have some type of frequency coordination analysis software, and I highly recommend that you begin to look at some software. So we're kind of running short on time, so let me skip down, if we can, please, to let's talk about the next wave of what we think will happen in wireless, and that is the digital wireless. What you see there briefly, I'm just trying to make the point that if all of the interference is coming from the audience, then you may want to look at down the line purchasing directional antennas, pointing them at your venue and away from the audience. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Not a great job of it, because you can see these directional antennas aren't exactly pointing away from the audience, but that was the shot that I was able to find to make the point. So the first digital wireless really that came out was a company called Zaxcom, and they mainly catered to the film production industry and are still around in ENG and film production. However, taking a look at the list of registrants, I noticed that most of us were in live sound, and the first digital wireless system that I really had the opportunity to test in a live sound situation was the AKG digital. I did extensive testing where I had the top-of-the-line Sennheiser, the top-of-the-line Shure at the time, I should say, and the digital AKG. And in general, my feeling is that the digital wireless equipment that's hitting the market here from the various manufacturers is going to be the way to go down the line when you're looking for better interference protection. I actually tuned several analog systems and the AKG digital to the same exact frequency. And the fact of the matter is any interference onto any FM system is absolutely going to kill it, and the audio will be unusable. You'll either have a noisy signal or premature dropouts if there is interference directly on an FM system. However, that same direct interference onto the digital system, due to the very nature that the digital wave is a little wider and carries many, many bits of digital encoding information, it takes an awful lot to create enough interference onto a digital wireless and make it unusable than it does on analog. Analog, it doesn't take much at all. I can have a TV station 70 miles away that's skipping into my venue on top of a wireless mic at a very low level, and it will create an audio anomaly that will result in that FM mic being unusable. However, I have found that the digital systems are much more tolerant to this type of interference. So AKG was the first one I tested. I had the opportunity to sit in on Shure's new digital mic webinar that they did recently. It was Gino from Shure, and did an awesome job at explaining not only digital, but introducing their new product. Unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity to play with the product in person yet, but the webinar certainly sounded great. And here again, because of the very nature of a digital design, much more linear RF amplifiers need to be employed in these transmitters. If you remember before, I said that using FM transmitters, that you can create intermod distortion because of the nonlinearity of the FM transmitter's final RF amplifier. Well, when we look at this digital equipment that's now hitting the market from these manufacturers, they have much more linear transmitters, and the fact is that you don't have to worry as much about intermod and mixing of frequencies. And because of that, you can usually get away with packing more radio mics into the same given 6 meg chunk. So instead of maybe 6 or 10 wireless mics, in the case of Shure, in high power, you can fit up to 17 wireless into one 6 meg chunk. So I don't want anybody to think that we're all doom and gloom here. I think with some of the advancements in technology that we have now, and with some knowledge and enlightenment on your own parts as operators, I do firmly believe that we will succeed. We will continue with American culture and the wireless mics that we are using to provide that American culture. So let's take a look at the next unit here, which is Sennheiser. And I think before I get into the technical aspects of Sennheiser, TC, I'm going to toss it to you here just for a moment. If you can hear me out there, we have a word from our sponsor.
And now a word from our sponsor. Yeah, just a little quick note here for our Chicago area attendees or anyone else. On November 8th, we're going to be hosting a Sennheiser Digital 9000 series launch. They're launching the product and they're doing a little tour here. We'll be in 2 locations for 2 events, in the morning at ILC, Intelligent Lighting Creations in Arlington Heights, and in the evening at Atwood Cafe, right downtown at the corner of State and Washington. So some Sennheiser reps will be on hand to demo the new Digital 9000 system. For more information or to register for either event, please visit our website, www.tcfurlong.com, Digital 9000, no spaces in there. And just wanted to get a little note in there while we're talking about digital wireless. That's November the 8th. And back to James.
Hey, TC, real quick while we got you, I see we have about 10 minutes left. Do we want to save some time here for Q&As, or how are we doing on questions?
Yeah, well, we haven't really announced questions yet, but
okay.
As we get through this, my idea was to have people start asking questions via the webinar. Type them in. I'll ask them over the air so that we can have you answer them. So we've got a couple of questions lined up. If anybody else would like to submit questions, please do so now. And we can go as long after 3 o'clock Central here with questions as anybody would like to stay on the line. James has agreed to hang on and answer a few questions. So start the questions as you think of them. I've been writing a few down myself as we've been going along. So so go ahead and we'll start that whenever you're ready, James. But I would assume maybe in 5 minutes or so, if you're able to, we could do that.
You got it. Very good. Okay. Hey, and I will stay here. I'm here for everybody today. I have nothing to do here for the next hour, and this is all for you. I strongly recommend that you take advantage of this opportunity, of this great TC webinar, and ask questions. And chances are there are 50 other people that had the same question. So really quick here, if I can comment on Sennheiser. I've played around with Sennheiser products like the 1046, which is the predecessor to this. It was very expensive at the time, the most expensive unit on the market, but even as a sole proprietor, I recognized that it was worth every penny, and I've used their top-of-the-line system, which is a 1046, and still continue to see it today, and that product is 25 years old. It was designed 25 years ago, so great longevity from Sennheiser. I'm sure the accountants should be happy about that. And it's also a great product, and I look forward to being able to play around with the Digital 9000, because I'm sure it has the same type of parts count. There is something else I'd like to mention, because we're talking about digital, and I don't want anyone to think that analog is trash or anything like this. I'm saying that we've come to a point in time where we need to explore other methods of modulation, other frequency bands, and other techniques. However, the Shure Axient and the Shure UHF-R, which I use on productions all the time, as well as the Sennheiser analog equipment. I mean, I'm flying out tomorrow to go to the Country Music Awards. I'm sure there's at least a half or dozen, I say, of each of those manufacturers' products on that show. And I don't want to underscore if you have FM product that you need to sell it to South America or something right away. That's not the case. I think that you need to go out and do your own A/B checks, your own analysis. I have not heard these two digital products yet, and I'm not going to make any claims until I do my own testing with these products. But clearly, this is the wave of the future that these manufacturers, the high-end ones anyway, will begin to introduce digital products for many of the same reasons, because they are more linear. You can pack more systems into the same spectrum, and the intermod distortion is less. And by the way, as an added benefit, you get greater usable range out of these systems than you would out of an FM system, because when you're using an FM system, eventually the background noise floor will come up to the point that it affects the audio quality and makes it unusable. However, in a digital system, you have the same perfect digital audio quality right up until the point that it goes away. And in my experience, that has meant a little bit better range than an analog system. My personal feeling, although it's only an opinion at this point, I have not tested this, is that the digital will be more accepting of TV band device interference as well as any other interference. I'd also real quickly like to introduce a new player on the marketplace, Radioactive Designs. It's a group of, a very small group actually, of some friends of mine, very good friends that over the years we're all in the wireless microphone and intercom industry and have been for multiple tens of years. And we put together a small group and found just an awesome group of component level RF design engineers. And we formed a coalition called Radioactive Designs, and our charter is to push radio designs to the envelope to accommodate all of the American culture that we've been talking about here. Our goal is to try to completely escape from the portable white space band and continue to be able to do these productions that we've all been doing. My partners are all from walks of life, from Broadway theater, from sporting, from broadcast, from special event, from theme park. So we represent all the different cultures that use wireless. and our goal is to come out with more spectrally efficient equipment so that we can continue on with our livelihoods long after these introduction of TV band devices and what could potentially be coming next. Whereas we've been talking about numbers like 10 to 15 or 20 wireless per 6 meg chunk, my partners and I believe we've achieved over 150 channels of RF in one 6 meg chunk. So I think that with that and some of the new digital product that we have, we will continue to survive. We will continue to produce great events. And I believe that we will go unscathed if we pay particular attention to the rules that we've gone over so far. And one more thing you could do for me, and if we can please take a look at the final, what could potentially be the final nail in our coffin from the FCC. Everything we've talked about has already come to pass. The FCC original release, it's a done deal, and television band devices will begin to be introduced in the United States over the next year. And I would guess that within 2 years, you will certainly begin to see the effects of these devices onto productions. It used to be where if you're sitting in church and a telephone rang, that was an annoyance. Now all you have to do here, well, in another 2 years, is walk into the church and not have it ring. Just by the very nature that it's on, you can literally take out wireless microphones that might be used by a pastor or on a Broadway show or any arts and entertainment by the performing artists. So here's the next wave of what could potentially happen, and here's where I really have to implore all of you within the sound of my voice to get involved here. Because the FCC is not done yet, and that's because the money people and the technology corporations are not done yet. So even though we're down in another 2 years to somewhat less than 4% of the spectrum that we've only had 2.5 years ago, and it's going to be difficult trying to crunch into that, well, here the FCC would like to launch additional spectrum, first in the world incentive auctions. They actually would like to go out and purchase the 6 meg chunks that are occupied by television broadcasters now to implement further super Wi-Fi devices. Here's where, please, contact your congressman, contact your Senate offices. There's no reason now to be worried about contacting the FCC because we're no longer operating illegally. Doesn't matter if you're a church, a school, or a play, you are now, by FCC regulations, authorized and able to operate your wireless microphone legally as long as you stick by Part 15 rules. So please look into this. You can email me for more info. You can email TC and he'll get the proper answers. If you are a sure person, contact Edgar Eiler, Mark Bruner. They're happy to help because we all know that if they continue to auction off additional broadcasts, well, in that case, we may end up going back to wired wedges for monitors, wired microphones or lip sync or track, and we will lose our ability to operate backstage with communication. So get involved, look into these, email me if you have questions. I will ensure that you get the answer back on who to contact and what to say so that we might be able to continue with our operations. In fact, since we're so close here, let's skip talking about radio analyzers and just if you can put up my contact info for the good folks listening here, and we'll take questions at this point.
Okay, James, thanks very much for that excellent presentation. We do have some questions, and we have quite a few, so we're going to ask people. First of all, James, I'm going to ask you if you'll give us, because we have a fair number of questions here, if you'll give us some kind of abbreviated answers, only because for sake of time. And if there's something that somebody wants to hear more about, please chime in a question. I'd like to hear more about the question that was just asked and then say it. So our first question comes from Matthew Godlewski, and his question is, in an ideal situation, how many wireless microphones can fit into a reserved 6 megahertz band? And I have a question that's going to tack onto the back of that, but I'll first ask James to answer that one.
Sure thing. Okay, well, the shorter answer is a minimum of 6, but certainly you should be able to get 12 wireless mics inside of a 6 meg chunk. That gives them a half a meg each. They should not be evenly spaced because of intermod. You'll be creating intermods, but you should be able to get 10 to 12, and in fact the FCC only requires that you put 6 inside of a 6 meg chunk before you seek protection from the database administrator.
Great. And then the question that I had to follow that up is, when we're talking about at what point do we need to register? So obviously we don't need to register if we have, say, 10 or 12 microphones that we can divide between the 2 reserved bands, correct, the reserve stations. What point do you think, what's the number that we would typically start to really get worried about needing to reserve and stay out of the way of those other channels that where TV BDs reside?
Absolutely great question. I think that the answer basically depends on what city you're in, because a city like Chicago, New York, LA, Dallas, there are 13 of the larger cities in the country where 470 to 512, which is low band UHF, is used by police, fire, and rescue. Now they don't take up the entire chunk, but they take up a good piece of it. So if you're in those cities, you're not going to get a whole lot of use out of the 470 to 512 band, which is where portable devices are not authorized to operate. So now you have to look at above 512. That leaves you 2 6 meg chunks, one above channel 37 and one below. So if you're in the market for gear, I suggest that you buy equipment that can tune from, let's say, 578 to 638 and be able to navigate around TV 37 on both sides. If you can fit 10 channels per 6 meg chunk, well, that gives you 20. And then the trick will be to look at what the new equipment coming out on the market is and what existing equipment is on the market already to spread out your operations to completely escape this portable white space band and look down in low band VHF, high band VHF, and if possible below 512 meg. Make sure that you adhere to the rules that you have to stay you have to stay in the band adjacent to an active TV station, because fixed devices are not authorized to go there. So anywhere you see that, in fact, we should make this this presentation public, TC, so people can go back and look at some of the graphs, particularly the one that shows where TV band devices are not authorized to operate in. So if you can find the appropriate gear in the appropriate sections. Yep, in the appropriate gear and the appropriate inspections, you can, I believe, get through this without having to register at all. Keep in mind, if you have completely filled up the band and you have to register, well, you're certainly allowed to do so. Just remember, as an unlicensed wireless mic, it takes 30 days for the registration to take effect. Unlike a broadcaster who gets immediate protection, you'll have to wait 30 days if you register with the FCC.
Right, and that brings up the next question from our friend Robert Locklear. He says, in the context of a house of worship, at what point do we need the FCC registration? We are at 25 channels between all our venues. And I'll just bring up that that's kind of a complicated question, because you really only have to register where you're going to use, it's by venue location, the registration is. Correct, James? I mean, it's not, so if you have two or three campuses, each of those is treated as a separate registration, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and the reason why is because when you register with the FCC's database, what that registration covers is your, let's say, a house of worship, or I'll just say back to like a Broadway theater or a Cirque du Soleil or any permanently installed venue. You only get protection for the 400 meters around that latitude and longitude. And from fixed devices, and that's portables, what could sit in your audience. And for the fixed devices, you only get 1 kilometer of protection. So if you have venues that are more than 400 meters from each other, then you absolutely have to go in and register these venues as independent registrations. So does everybody get that? And the other part of your question was, you have 25 systems. You have 25 systems. Well, you should be able to fit that into the areas that the FCC has already allocated for us without seeking registration. Worst case, you may have to get some freaks changed or something to fit into above and below TV 37, or move below into the VHF band if possible. But with 25 devices, if you're talking multiple locations, yes, each location absolutely needs its own registration with the whitespace database administrators.
But technically, you should be able to fit those in without registering if you do a good job of band planning and all the other things that you talked about, correct? You wouldn't necessarily need to register all those events if you're able to fit it.
Yes, absolutely correct. You know, it might be a little tough, but 25 devices, particularly if you can use again, VHF and 470 to 512, 25 devices should not be difficult. If you're limited to the two 6 meg chunks up above and below 37, well, that's only 12 meg. Now you're cutting it a little bit close, but you should be able to get by without having to register. Personally, I'm going to try to get through my events without having to register, other than working as a coordinator where I have to get 400 other entities to operate. Then I'll have to register. But on an average award show where there might be 120 wireless or so, I am going to try to do that in the bands that the FCC has already allocated for us, because I don't want to overplay this registration to where the FCC says, you know what, we're just going to sell off this band, because they already have big money people looking at the band. We're a very small player. Radio spectrum suddenly has a value. It's been free to operate all our lives here, or at least I should say since 1941, and now suddenly it has a value and people are buying spectrum. They paid $20 billion for the 698 to 806 meg chunk. So radio has a value, and the FCC is going to follow money.
Great. Our next question comes from our friend Matt Wentz. What was the company name for the manufacturer of those tuning devices?
That was Microwave Filter. Microwave Filter is in Syracuse, New York, and you can get the device. It's a 6 meg filter, brick wall. They work great. I use them on almost every event and installation where possible. They are not very expensive. I think they're under $200, and you can get them pre-tuned at the factory for whatever open channel above and below TV 37 is for you. If you're talking about wireless mics, obviously you'll need 2 because they're diversity systems. So you'll need 2 above and 2 below. Microwave filters.
Great. Thanks, James. Our next question comes from Andrew Guberman. What about the public safety in the 470 to 500 range?
Yes, absolutely. It's actually 470 to 512. There are 13 cities where those broadcasts exist now. They don't take up every bit of 470 to 512. They're usually placed into 6 meg chunks in the TV bands down there, which would be channels 14 through 20. So you should be able to find a couple of frequencies to work down there. I mean, at this point, we're really trying to nickel and dime our own installations so we can squeeze in as much as possible. And if that means that we could fit another 3 or 4 here and another 3 or 4 in this other band, well, that's all going to help, because those little 3 and 4s add up to dozens. And so, yes, you need to find out. In fact, you could drop me an email, let me know what city you're in, and I'll let you know if there's public safety in the city that in question here.
Great, thank you. I also just noticed that on the question and answer slide, the contact information for TC Furlong, Inc. is not accurate. So I'll just make the verbal correction. The phone number is 847-367-9588. James, it looks like your 5 key may have stuck at the end there. So it's 9588, not 55, in case anybody tries calling and thinks we're out of business. So there, thank you. Okay. So the next question comes from Ethan Mills, and that is this being recorded for resale? And I'm going to ask Michael to chime in on how that's going to work when we're done. So we'll wait on that one until we're done. Stan Hunter asks, what version is that of IAS? I think he's referring to the slide that you had up of IAS.
Yeah, actually, that's a brand new version. I just happened to be out at Professional Wireless 2 weeks ago and got that from Jason, the guy who wrote it. I don't know that he has made that update public yet, but he may be listening now, and certainly you can email Jason Eskew. It's jason@professionalwireless.com, or you can email me and I'll get you the answer. But in short, that is the most recent version and may not even have been released yet, but he gave me the graph to use for the TC webinar here. Good question.
Great. We have, thanks, James. We have another question that comes from Roy Welter. Do you know the current status of the National Broadband Plan that the FCC submitted to Congress March 15, 2010? This includes a proposed reallocation of 120 megahertz for mobile broadband use. This covers TV channels 31 to 61, Roy states, from the broadcast TV bands transitioning in 2015.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that is in relation to the second FCC press release, or news release, I should say, that I showed here just before this contact graph, actually. And the status is that we have until December. I don't have the exact date in December, but I shall find out. And at some point in there, I believe the middle of December, we have to comment on whether we, or how we feel that the FCC's National Broadband Plan and additional spectrum options will affect us in our own, whether we're a church or a performance venue or what have you, or a broadcaster. So that's why I said that I encourage all of you listening to the sound of my voice to contact your congressional offices, your Senate offices, and the FCC and provide comment on that. I absolutely will get that info to you on the date and how you can comment. In fact, I get that info from the guys at Shure, from Mark Bruner and Edgar Isle, and I may even make a trip, as I'm sure many people will, to Washington, D.C. to talk to them in person, but you have until December to comment on that. My feeling is, yes, it's going to happen, and hopefully we'll be able to stay one step ahead of these spectrum auctions and try to devise new ways of doing our business and new products coming out to alleviate this crunch and stay one step ahead of them. But in the long run, I do believe we will lose, continue to lose further spectrum. So by commenting, what we do is we just delay that process. As I say, if Shure hadn't already delayed the process, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We'd already be using wired wedges, wired mics, and styrofoam cups and strings for comms. So we need to comment, and we need to try to prolong any changes to give the manufacturers and ourselves an opportunity to settle into what they've already done.
Great. Thanks. Our friend and associate Brad Galvin asks, how much latency is being accrued on these digital units, input of the mic to the output of the receiver?
Yeah, that's a good question. From what I've found, it's been acceptable, less than 5 milliseconds. I haven't had the opportunity to do a round-trip test with in-ears because I don't know that in-ear digital systems are available yet. If anybody's working on it first, it would probably be AKG, although I don't know. But they're usually about 5 milliseconds, and I'm sure if you talk to Sennheiser and Shure, particularly if I've overestimated it, I'm sure they'll give you the right number. But I remember that was an acceptable amount. It was maybe 3 to 5 milliseconds, and I believe Sennheiser said closer to 1 to 2 milliseconds. So they're acceptable.
Great, thanks, James. Bo Warmbold asks, I had heard that the wireless mic registration database is open, but for New York area only for now. Is that still the case?
Actually, it's all of the East Coast, New York down to Florida. It doesn't seem to be horribly organized yet. I tapped on it a couple of days ago and couldn't really get anywhere. I'm sure I was doing something wrong, or perhaps they don't have it fully implemented. There will be 10 database administrators. I think the FCC is reviewing those, and there are only 1 or 2 now. I believe it's KeyBridge and Spectrum Bridge. The database will continue to move out west, and by next year will be available in every city in the country. However, right now they've sort of done a trial kickoff run from New York to Florida. For the DNC, the Democratic Convention, which was in Charlotte, North Carolina, they did have fixed white space or TV band devices. And also, for the first time in the history of special events, the frequency coordinator, a gentleman by the name of Louis Libin, requested and, in fact, demanded that we don't use any wireless intercoms because of the spectral crunch that we were in just from the wireless mics and other devices. And, in fact, Louis was kind enough to go out to the FCC and get a special temporary authority for my group, which was the production group and Obama's Democratic committee folks, to use equipment above 700 meg. We actually had a waiver to use 700 meg and old Shure 800 megs up in the U8 band. So that was probably the last time we'll get to play with that equipment. But yes, absolutely, East Coast first, and then it'll move out west.
Great. And our good friend Shelton Thompson asked, does IAS software work with any live spectrum analyzers?
I think the only thing that you can do, and I haven't done it myself, is that you can upload a real-time list. This is all part of the newest changes that Jason made to the software. I haven't played with it yet, but he has essentially a bunch of real-world sweeps that people have done from shows all over the country, and they've uploaded the files to Jason, and you can actually access Spectrum Analyzer files from the new version of IAS and see what television there is. Other than that, I am not aware of any way to interface a Spectrum Analyzer with the IAS software. However, if Jason's listening, please go ahead and send me a comment now, or you can drop me that in an email, and I'll get you the answer if the one I just gave is not accurate.
Great, thanks. Jeff Jones asks, are Zaxcom digital wireless true digital wireless?
Yeah, the president of Zaxcom, a guy named Glenn Sanders, explained to me the method in which he goes about modulating. And he uses a little bit of AM, a little bit of FM, and I believe a little bit of pulse modulation. He showed it to me on a graph. I didn't entirely grasp what he was saying. I know there's a lot of talk of this manufacturer's wireless being a hybrid of digital analog and so forth. But from what I could tell from the wave that I saw and from the testing that I did, yes, I mean, absolutely, it was digital because it wasn't just analog. Where we get into exactly what that line is, honestly, I couldn't tell you, and I don't want to try to guess.
Okay, great, thanks.
I'll check into that.
Sure. Andrew Guberman is back with a question, and it says, this is in relation to the slide that showed the intelligent spectrum use. If you are going to set up mics in the 470 to 500 range, 470 to 488 is public safety, and 488 to 500 are two DTV stations. I don't see a question there, but I'm going to say, would you care to explain, is his question.
Well, clearly in the city that you're talking about, there is no room to operate. If you have active digital television stations adjacent to public safety, then that band is off limits. So you're in the one of the 13 cities where your spectrum is going to be the 2.6 meg chunks around TV 37, which is a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and they keep that 608 to 614 meg clear to listen to people from Alpha Centauri or Taurus. But you also could look down below in the VHF spectrum. Channels 2 through 13 is going to be a viable solution in the future, because clearly 12 meg is not enough to operate 120 microphones and intercoms. And that, when I said that we're reduced to 3.6% of what we had just 2.5 years ago, that's the 12 meg chunk that I'm talking about. The 6 meg above and the 6 meg below TV 37. In your case, if 14 to 20, TV 14 to 20, which is 470 to 512, is occupied, then yes, I'm sorry to say, you are limited to the 3.6% that we've had 2.5 years ago, or you can go down into VHF and use the VHF spectrum, which is what I'm going to have to recommend if you have nowhere else to go in UHF.
Yep. Jason Spence asks, for current installations, are there any preventative steps we can take to prepare for the spectrum devices scheduled to hit the market in addition to RF filters?
Yes, absolutely. First thing you could do is when you position your antennas, position them, use directional antennas with a front-to-back ratio that will attenuate anything behind it, and you'll want to aim those antennas away from your audience. Second thing is purchase equipment for your installation that has the ability to tune above and below the TV channel 37 that's available in your installation area. I don't know everybody's splits, but off the top of my head, it would be for sure, for example, is a J5 split. Sennheiser has wideband equipment now that goes from 470 to 698, so there's really only one split. I think it's N or L, I can't remember which. But the point is, whatever hardware, whether it's Electrosonics, Audio-Technica, radioactive designs, you need to look at the spectrum that you have the ability to tune to and make sure that you can tune to that and that it goes above and below TV 37 in the 2.6 meg chunks that you're allowed. That's the first line of defense, will be getting into clear spectrum that portable devices do not have the authorization to tune to. And hello, Jason Spence, by the way.
Great. Andrew McHaddad asks, when do you anticipate IAS or similar software products will include digital wireless equipment?
Wow, Andrew McHaddad is listening?
Yes, sir.
This guy's top shelf. Now I wish I would have paid more attention to what I was saying here. Hopefully he's not going to send me an email that I made mistakes. But hello, Andrew. I think that that's something that we need to see immediately. In fact, the people that write the software would be the ones to respond to that. I hope Jason Eske's listening because, as I say, he wrote PWSs. Maybe the people from Shure who wrote Wireless Workbench and so forth are listening. But absolutely, we need to do some more interface with the computer systems that are out there right now.
Thanks. John Caswell asked, who is the RF brick wall filter manufacturer? I think we already answered that, but if you could just throw out the name there one more time, James.
Yep, that's Microwave Filter out of Syracuse, New York. They're tunable from 450 to 850 meg. They can be pre-tuned. If you're having an issue getting it tuned, you can send it to me. I'll tune it for you. It takes about 3 minutes. Look at the 2-pole filters. The 4 poles take a little longer to tune. They're all about the same price, and they all provide similar brick wall protection.
Great. Hi, John. Next one comes from Al Zorn. Any thoughts on, and I'll leave out the name of the manufacturer, a manufacturer using Wi-Fi 2.4 gig band?
Yeah, you know, the name of the game has been and will continue to be to find places outside of the traditional UHF wireless band from 512 to what was 806, and now, of course, it's 698. 2.4 gig is one place to look to go. However, I wouldn't recommend going to 2.4 gig if your installation or your venue or your event has lots of Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi, as we all know, operates at 2.4 gig. The NFL and college football is now implementing what they call fans first. I believe the NBA is also. In other words, they're going to inundate the stadiums and arenas with 2.4 gig so that every fan could have quick access. When you do that, you slow down the other 2.4 gig equipment because it's all sharing spectrum. It's all spread spectrum, frequency, or time hopping. And as an RF coordinator, there have been several occasions where I've had to turn off wireless audio equipment that's operating at 2.4 gig because it was crushing the Wi-Fi. Or on the other hand, sometimes the Wi-Fi can create the wireless device to not operate to its manufacturer's specification. Now, if that device happens to be a life safety intercom, bad news. We can't have people getting hurt or killed because the person wearing the wireless device that was trying to warn that someone's about to get run over by a large prop being moved onto the stage is getting interfered with to the point that they can't communicate. So 2.4 gig could be a good place to go as long as there's not a lot of 2.4 gig Wi-Fi in the venue. I have one corporate customer, and that's Microsoft, and you can imagine that we are inundated with 2.4 gig, and I wouldn't dream of trying to operate a 2.4 gig piece of equipment in such a scenario. However, if there's no Wi-Fi or little Wi-Fi, then absolutely getting away from the traditional 512 to 698 meg band should be a goal going forward.
Right, and also there aren't as many accessories like antennas and directional stuff made for 2.4 gig that's readily available from manufacturers, as I understand it. So it might be harder to accessorize a system. Isn't that right, James, to be able to operate more efficiently?
Oh, well, absolutely. And in addition to that, the FCC, because that is a Part 15 band, it's really not legal to change genders on little SMA connectors and use outboard RF amplifiers and directional antennas, because as a Part 15 device, you really have to sell these devices with the antennas that they come with, and you can't legally boost anything. And when I'm on a webinar like this, I'm trying to put out information that is both accurate and legal. And so, yes, absolutely lose out on all sorts of useful accessories by going up into these consumer Wi-Fi bands.
Great. And the next one we have is from Brian Green, but it's not a question. He writes, no question, just wanted to say thank you. This has been very helpful and informative. Thanks from Austin, Texas. So we thank you, Brian, for attending. Once again, Andrew McCadden is there, and he asks, can you touch once more on the above-below CH37 concept?
Above. Oh, okay. Very quickly. Yes, that's an easy one. Can we go back to any of the PowerPoint graphs, because there was one that showed all of the. There we go. That's the one I'm looking at. Okay. What this pretty much, if you download anything at all, this is what it should be, because in a year to two from now, this is the world that we will be living in. These TV band devices are authorized to operate pretty much anywhere. The fixed devices can go all the way down to channel 2. However, they're not allowed to operate adjacent to an active TV channel. So it's really changed our game. Before, we would try to avoid TV channels and get as far from them as possible. And now, here we are, where we want to live adjacent to TV channels because that's the clean spot that wireless, or rather TV band devices are not authorized to operate in. So if you look at this chart, what I was saying about TV 37 is that the FCC has given us 6 meg above and 6 meg below television 37. No portable devices are authorized to operate there. No fixed devices are allowed to operate there. So in the entire country, above, we're talking about UHF TV, not VHF, but in the UHF band, the only two 6 meg chunks, the only 12 meg that we are guaranteed by the FCC is the first 6 meg above and the first 6 meg below TV 37. Now, I know Andrew's in LA, and I know it's extremely busy down there in the low end of the spectrum. I couldn't even tell you what the first, I would have to go look at my sweep of the Rose Bowl that I did a couple of weeks ago to tell you what the first available channel might be. It may not be channel 38. It might be channel 43. So whatever that number is, or whatever that TV channel is and its associated frequencies, when you're out looking to buy new equipment, you'll absolutely want to make sure that that new equipment could tune to the frequencies that represent the 6 meg chunk of TV spectrum above and below TV 37. In my opinion, you should be able to get about maybe 15 or 20 RFs to operate up there. If you have to use mics and ears, I'd make the low-end ears and the high-end mics to give yourself some spectrum band planning and further decrease the noise floor on those where those mics are living. They're looking for very low levels of energy, microvolts, and so you don't want to park a multiple watt of radiated power in-ear monitor combiner within the same band. You want to separate by both frequency, spectrum, and by antenna distance between your transmit antenna for the ears or comms and your receive antenna for the mics and comms.
So James, that brings up a question. Is it necessary to sweep for what's available above or below channel 37, or is that available in a database to anyone right now?
Oh, absolutely. You can go, if you look at my Q&A, I have some graphs there, Michael. I believe it's number 14. There's some sources that you can throw here. I found Shure's website to be very accurate. I'm looking at a blank screen there myself. Now, looking at number 14, although that's a great shot, but essentially there are sources. There you go. You can look at NAB's website. Shure's I found to be very accurate. Also, you see www.sbe.org. That is the Society of Broadcast Engineers. And if you are getting ready to go into a city that you haven't operated in yet, it's a great idea to contact the Society of Broadcast Engineers. You can do it via email or a phone call. And if anyone would like, I will make the list of the national list of frequency coordinators available. I was actually the frequency coordinator for the Society of Broadcast Engineers chapter in Central Florida when I lived in Orlando. And most of these folks are just good working engineers, and they're happy to help. I'm going next week to do the country, actually tomorrow I'm leaving to set up Country Music Awards. Well, the first thing I did was I emailed the free coordinator for the Society of Broadcast Engineers in Nashville, and I asked him for a list of television, and he was kind enough to forward that list. And most, as I say, most of the SBE free coordinators in the country are good guys, and they want to help because they're protecting their own broadcasts as well. If you go in there and you fire up a system that steps on their studio, the transmitter link, well, they're off air. They want to help you. They want your wireless to work because that means that their broadcast will work. So the SBE is just a great source for information. Beyond that, of course, you know, over-the-air programming is listed in Sunday papers, TV guides, but there are certainly many ways that you can find out what TV you have to contend with in a city that you've never operated wireless in. Here's a couple of sources. Also, I believe the PWS software has a built-in database as well, I believe, as the Shure wireless workbench. But when I'm looking for TV, I generally go to Shure's website.
Okay, thanks, James. We have a lot more questions, so we're going to keep zipping through them here. This is a very excellent question because we want to distinguish this. Jeff Jones asks, is Shure Axient digital?
No, it is not. Shure Axient is an FM system. The digital, well, here's one of those that we can call a hybrid, I guess, because it does contain digital technology. However, the digital technology in the Axient is a 2.4 gig link that's used to control the transmitter from the receive location backstage. However, the RF in an Axient from the wireless handheld, from the music performer to the receiver, is an analog FM signal. It happens to sound a lot better than some of the older FM technology because it uses new components, and I've even done blind tests on shows with music mixers and truck mixers, and I've put in an Axient where they didn't expect it, and then after the show I would ask what they thought, and they've all hands down said, you know, that sounded a lot smoother than the other microphones, whether they were Shure's or Sennheisers or Audio Technicas. So the Axient, yes, uses a digital component, but does not affect audio. The digital component of that system is used as a return link at 2.4 gig to program the transmitter from backstage. So you don't have to run out and swap out a backup handheld if somebody's handheld takes a hit. The Axient does it automatically and switches frequencies of that actual audio transmitter, I should say, in the 470 to 698 band based on interference. And that is the digital portion of the link. It's a 2.4 gig Wi-Fi, not the audio.
Right, and James, I think it's important to point out that analog wireless is not going to be a thing of the past, and Shure Axient is an example of a way that analog wireless is dealing with the much smaller spectrum that's available. And if you could talk a little bit about the fact that analog is not going away, and that
there's absolutely that is a great point, because though we've shown here today a few of the new digital products coming out, the fact of the matter is that there is a host of analog technology that is just now being developed for deployment here over the next few months. And so maybe towards the beginning of next year, you'll begin to see absolutely brand new products that operate in the analog realm and not the digital realm. Digital is, yes, there are some advantages to it. However, analog is not going away. And some of the newer products that just came out, like the Axient, are all analog, and they'll continue to be used. When I do a music show or a design or a special event or an installation, I use a ton of analog technology right now, and it'll continue to be high-end years to come. They're making it better. They find better components as we advance in time and what parts are available. And some of the new technology will use other aspects of modulation, which I mentioned earlier here. This is all analog equipment. There may be some digital components, such as the digital audio for processing, or maybe in the case of the Axient for control links. However, the audio will be on a FM or AM modulation scheme, which is absolutely analog.
Great, thanks, James. Ray Nardelli asks, how long would you need to reserve space with the FCC prior to your event?
Yes. Okay, if you're a broadcaster, it's almost immediate. If you are not, and I'm assuming most of the people here listening are not, which means we're unlicensed wireless users, you actually have to submit your request to the database administrator. You have to certify that you've already looked at VHF for microphones or comms or IFBs and so forth. And once you send in your database registration, there is a 30-day comment period in which someone who doesn't like you could essentially tell the FCC that they don't want you to operate your wireless there. And that's the unfortunate thing about being an unlicensed user. Yes, the FCC has acknowledged that we are here. There are 2 million of us, but unfortunately we do not get immediate protection from the database, which, by the way, is another reason to try to fit as much of your equipment as you can in bands that the FCC has already given us that don't require registering in this database. You really need to get up into the multiple dozens of wireless before you should have to look at this database registration, in my opinion. We really won't know until the market becomes flooded with white space devices, or I'm sorry, TV band devices, to see what the effect is going to be on wireless microphones. I have my suspicions. I'm going to take all the precautions I can. I'm going to tell as many people about these devices as I can. But really, until the devices come out and start to energize within 20 feet of your microphone receive antennas, we won't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to try to stay away from white space portable device frequencies entirely.
That's a noteworthy comment right there.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Tim Fandry. Do any of these new wireless systems enable encryption for secure applications?
Well, okay, that's a great question. For the most part, any digital wireless is somewhat encrypted by its nature, because when you say encryption to me, what you're saying is that you want to make sure that, let's say if you're a college football team and someone's speaking on a wireless intercom, what encryption means to me is that you can't go out and buy a Radio Shack scanner for $100 and listen in. Or maybe there's a corporate executive and the competitors are sitting in a room a few doors down listening with the scanner. But to demodulate, or I should say detect the audio from a digital device, you would have to have a like receiver. In other words, if they're on a Shure digital piece of equipment, you would need a Shure receiver. Does that make it encrypted? Absolutely not. That just simply means that you can't listen to it on an FM scanner or an AM scanner. So by their nature, I would say that your chances of being listened in on are reduced, but no, those digital devices aren't absolutely encrypted. They are, well, they could not be picked up by an FM or an AM radio scanner, and that's about the level of protection you're going to get. And I don't know if Shure or Sennheiser plans on encryption. However, because it is a digital device, I would think that it would just be a software program to be able to encrypt these devices, including other devices that will be hitting the market over the next few months.
Thanks, James. I'm going to keep moving here. We've got a lot more questions. Anthony Bartucci asks, should you use the same antenna distro for digital and analog wireless microphone systems?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any difference in using an antenna splitter, for example. However, I can tell you that when you're talking about various types of analog modulation, there will be different types of components required. For example, if you look at some of the in-ear monitor combiners on the market today, they have an automatic gain control. So if you put in a Sennheiser G2 at 20 milliwatts and an old Shure PSM 600 at 50 milliwatts, and some of the newer equipment like Shure and Sennheiser and AKG that goes to 100 milliwatts, well, the combiners out there will automatically adjust the RF gain so that the outputs, when combined, are all equivalent. Naturally, if you're using that type of device, you could not use it with any type of amplitude modulation, because rather than deviating the frequency, what happens is the modulation happens by altering the amplitude of the signal, and you'd have a combiner that's continually trying to catch up, and its AGC circuits would continually try to keep up with the AM envelope. So there you'll need different products when you start to see technologies in analog realm that are different than frequency modulation. However, I have not heard from anyone yet that we will need to purchase new splitters to work with the digital wireless equipment. And if anyone has any different info, please send it into TC right away, whether you're Shure, Sennheiser, or AKG. I can tell you, when I did my testing with the AKG and the analog units, I did use my splitter, which was a Shure wideband UHFR splitter. So it works just fine. We did pass audio, and so I don't think you'll need to purchase all new accessories or antennas to go to digital. And if, again, if I'm wrong, please send Sennheiser or Shure or somebody let me know.
So that answers David Naunton's question, too, about the using the same antennas in coax. We're going to think that it's the same cable, same antennas, because it's RF. Great. So Barry Lashane asks, how do I certify that I cannot accommodate all of the unlicensed mics, approximately 30, that I intend to use at my church?
Okay, if you start poking around, and again, you might want to start playing now. Last I checked, I couldn't get a great response from the Whitespace database administration. But again, look at Spectrum Bridge and KeyBridge. Those are the two that I believe are either on the air or close out of the 10 administrators out there.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. John Caswell, James's contact info was put up probably since you asked your question, so we'll ask Michael to put it up again too. And then another question from Brian Green, was this recorded and will it be available for download? The answer is yes, and we'll put it up at the end. Andrew Schuler asks, can you seek protection for a larger show with multiple gear suppliers? For instance, auto show press events. There are typically 10 to 15 events operating in one convention hall, with each event using 10 to 30 transmitters and multiple equipment providers. That's a really interesting question, isn't it, James? Because I think it's important to note that this does not protect anybody against interference from each other. The registration only makes it so that TV band devices, television band devices, cannot operate within that TV channel for that period of time. And that's something that's you kind of have to hear a couple of times to really understand. Can you comment on that, James?
Yeah, absolutely, because I work as an RF coordinator as well as an operator. And so I fully expect when I work as a coordinator that I will receive requests from multiple different types of users. For example, let's just look at the Rose Bowl, which would be the next big one coming up where I have to work in a capacity of interfacing with multiple people. We'll have ESPN might have a set of frequencies here on the field and a field location. The coach comms, for example, will be on either side of the field. There'll be all these different operators. Maybe the entertainment, who's in charge of the national anthem and the halftime show, will have a set of frequencies. Well, the way this is going to work is that as the coordinator for the event, you will be the primary contact with the database administrator. So you'll be the one responsible for pulling all of these frequencies together. First, you'll have to do your own coordination, as you always would on any show, using an intermod software and doing a sweep and looking at the open TV channels. And then once you coordinate all of the specific frequencies for each individual user, then at that point you need to upload your registration to the database. So yes, this will add a little bit of time to the frequency coordination or pre-production effort. And the way the database works is you'll be requesting 6 megahertz chunks of spectrum. So if you can fit 8 or 10 mics into a 6 meg chunk, you'll be protected that entire chunk. In this question in particular, it was an auto show, which could be in an entire convention center, which, keep in mind, might be larger than 400 meters. So, which means you may have to put in 2 requests, one for one end of the convention hall and the other for the other end of the convention hall. Because I've worked in convention centers that are a mile long, so clearly if you put in only one registration for a 6 meg chunk on one end, you may not be protecting the same frequencies on the other end of the same convention hall. So,
right,
so
and also, James, it's possible that more than one person can apply. You don't necessarily need a coordinator to apply. More than one entity can apply for the same protection.
That's absolutely correct. When we had our original discussions, the concept of an RF coordinator came up because at that time the FCC was assuming the only real large events would be, you know, Super Bowls and NBA All-Stars, and so they were looking to the RF coordinators to be the interface. However, now anyone could sign on. You know, you can be the audio ministry of your church, and you could sign on, but you simply have to certify, and I showed that earlier at the beginning of the presentation, You simply have to certify that you've explored, in the FCC's words, every other means practicable. In other words, if there's VHF equipment available, you have to have used it. If there's UHF equipment in the TV 36 and 38 spectrum available, you have to have at least 6 wireless mics or comms or ears in each of those chunks. And after that, then you sign your life away. You say, yes, I've looked in VHF, I've used all of these available channels, and yet I still need protection. Well, under the new FCC rules, you and I, as unlicensed operators, are authorized to get that protection. We just have to wait 30 days to make sure no one talks the FCC out of letting us use those frequency bands.
Right. And in concept, to Andy's point, it will be easier for one person who applies on behalf of the entire show and of all the wireless to qualify, because that means that he has more wireless devices that are going to be online that he can say will fill up the necessary channels that are required before you're authorized to go and use to accommodate. Correct?
That's absolutely correct, and that's why, as an RF coordinator, yes, you do have the ability to honestly say that, hey, look, I'm in charge now of several hundred wireless microphones. This is on one show, and where the FCC thought there was only 1,000 or so in the entire country, and you're using a couple of hundred. I know these motor shows have tons and tons and hundreds of wireless, as do many corporate theater and trade shows now.
Great. I'll zip on to our next question. Brian Scocera asks, in a larger geographic setting, what is the distance between wireless systems before you can reuse the same frequencies?
That's a dangerous one. Generally, I would refrain from going on identical frequencies. If you're in an open air environment, you'd better be a couple of thousand feet away before you pick even a frequency that's close. And by close, I mean within 100 kilohertz or so. And I assume we're talking about FM here and not the digital equipment, because that will respond differently and only time will tell. But in real world tests, for example, if I have like a Mexican billboard show where there's a show inside with 100 and something wireless and then a red carpet outside, I mean, you may be able to see the red carpet microphones from inside, but if you offset them by 100 or 150 kilohertz, well, the receiver inside would rather grab onto the transmitter that is directly on its frequency than to try to grab something 150 kilohertz away. So I would really try to refrain from identical frequencies. If I had enough separation to where the other systems weren't creating direct interference, I would still offset them by a couple of hundred kilohertz if possible. And the answer is that there is no distance. It's more of a fact. The matter is, at what point and through what level of structure can I operate two systems that are close in frequency?
Great, thanks. I agree. That's an excellent way to put it. So Brian Green follows up with a question. So a touring sound company is covered by the registration of the house as long as the proper freaks are used? I would have to chime in here and say that no one is covered by the house unless it's coordinated or I guess submitted for approval 30 days in advance. That would require some long-term planning to be able to be covered by a house registration. Correct, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're on a tour and you're going to operate in a venue that already has protection for their own wireless, then you just need to make sure that your wireless is within the same 6 megahertz chunk, I should say, as the protected venues. Because each city is going to be different. Each city is going to have a different set of protected frequency bands based on what TV channels are available above and below 37. And in addition, I would be hesitant to place my own operations in someone else's hands. If you have the ability to upload directly to a database administrator yourself, I would think that that would be the better option than to trust that someone else is going to do that work for you. It shouldn't be extremely time-consuming to upload these. There's some paperwork, 4 or 5 pages. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes to fill out, and at least then you are the contact on that report. Again, don't be afraid. The FCC is not out to get us anymore. We're operating legally now, so don't be concerned with getting above the radar with the FCC as you may have been when we were operating illegally just a few short years ago. But I would personally want to take responsibility for my own database registration and not trust anyone else to do it unless they are the appointed radio frequency coordinator, like in the case of the Democratic conventions. I wasn't the coordinator on that show. Louis Libman was. So I submitted my freaks to Louis Libman, and then my hope would be that when the time came that those frequencies would be uploaded and registered. So that's, if there is an appointed RF coordinator, you have to trust them to do their job. If there is not, then I would say do it yourself.
Great, thanks. Austin Swan asks, what is your take on handheld spectrum wireless analyzers? A best recommendation?
Okay. Matter of fact, if you go there, Michael, to the, I have two pages that I was going to put out if we had time. There's a bunch of them right here. First off, I should briefly say that a lot of manufacturers already have analysis equipment built into their core product. For example, a big part of the new Shure Axient is a spectrum, essentially it's a spectrum analyzer in a rack space that talks to the wireless mics and transmitters. Well, that would be considered part of a core AC powered product. Some of this, what you specifically asked, portable units, as you see here, you can go as on the lower end, I should say, would be a handheld radio scanner, like you see to the right. That happens to be an ICOM. I think it costs about $350 or so, and that'll give you the ability to do some spectral analysis. And then the unit on the bottom is the TTI PSA 1303. I've used that exclusively for several years as my only spectrum analyzer, and I know that for a while people were saying that the unit has been discontinued. However, I did find a company that not only sells newer versions, but I found another company that will fix your old version. If you have a problem, you can send me an email and I'll forward the info to the company here in the U.S. that repairs those. These are a little bit, well, I'm not going to say on the lower end because $1,500 is by no means not pricey. But if you go to the next graph there, Michael will take a look at the next level up. I've used all of these, by the way. The pictures came mostly from pictures I took, and so I have experience with these. You know, the top of the line is going to be your Anritsus and your Roden Schwartzes. Those are up around the $8,000 area, but they're precision instruments. You could tune filters with them. You could tune antennas and transmitters with them if you so choose. And in fact, if you go on eBay, you can probably find some pretty good deals. I just recently bought a version of that Roden Schwartz, which brand new was $24,000 because it has some generators and distance to fault measurements, but I was able to pick it up used for under $8,000, so about a third the price. It's in great condition and it continues to work for me today. So yes, handheld analyzers are a must, particularly when you have to go out and try to find interfering signals like ENG news crews or other wireless that may have fired up without your knowledge. Or maybe you're finding an ice machine, because the last big problem I had turned out to be an ice machine that was creating interference onto about 15 wireless mic receivers. So whatever the source of interference is, you'll need some way to find it, and a portable analyzer and a little paddle directional antenna are the tools that you're going to need to do that. And there's a few right there of various prices.
And let me also put in a commercial for our rental department here. The urge to buy is only mental. Rent instead from TC's Rental. We have TTIs in rental stock in case anybody wants to take them out and take them for a spin before investing $1,500. So our next question comes from Barry Leshane. I have 28 channels of wireless mics and 8 channels of wireless IEMs. Is it recommended that I register?
Well, if you can fit those IEMs and microphones into the already reserved channels, then you don't have to register. One way to look at that would be to separate your systems into the 6 meg chunks above and below 37. You may be able to fit 25 RF mics there. You might have to put them into low power so that they're not radiating as large of a footprint. which means you'll have to enhance your receiver antenna system to have some gain to make up for that lack of power. In other words, if you're transmitting 28 mics now at 50 or 100 milliwatts, well, you probably can't fit that into 12 meg. But if you lower their power out to 10 milliwatts, then you have a better chance of fitting more systems into the 12 meg of guaranteed spectrum around TV37. And then following proper spectrum band planning, you might want to look at putting your in-ear monitors down below 512 meg to keep some separation and keep the noise floor low on your mics. And I think between those two moves, or if you look at VHF if possible, for if you're using any of those in-ears as IFBs, there's equipment available now already. So I believe that you're cutting it close. 25 mics, I'll admit, it's going to be tough to fit into 12 meg, but in low power and by altering your receive antennas to make up for that power reduction, you have a real good chance of being able to do this without having to register with the FCC. I would also implement the 6 meg filters to keep the noise floor down from portable devices when they energize over the next year.
Gotcha. Our next question comes from Jeff Pelletier. Will the FCC be more stringent on managing non-compliance with the new reality, i.e. fines?
Okay, let's talk brass tacks here. The FCC does not have a huge enforcement bunch of people. When I was in Florida, I believe we had 5 FCC offices at one point, and then last I checked before I moved out of Orlando, we were down to 1. So that left 1 office in Tampa to take care of all of the potential complaints anywhere in the state of Florida. Now remember, the FCC is not going to send people out hunting for issues. You know, these are government workers, and they're going to work as little as possible, actually. So that means that the only time they're going to come out after you is if they get a complaint. So that's number one. If no one calls the FCC offices and complains, then you're not going to have a random FCC Enforcement Bureau person knocking at your door. What I can tell you, though, is that the companies that purchase this band, like Verizon is one of them, and the reason I'm mentioning Verizon is that they have their own enforcement people. I was working one year as the RF coordinator at the NBA All-Star Games, and someone had come in and energized 4 low-power in-ear monitor devices within the band that Verizon owns. Well, I got the call at 7:30 in the morning to come in to the venue early because those 4 in-ear monitors completely took out the entire Verizon cell phone network inside the stadium. So if you had Verizon, you were not able to make a phone call. And when you pay $20 million for Spectrum, you want to make sure that it's usable. When I showed up to the venue, there were no less than 7 Verizon employees with 4-foot-long Yagi directional antennas pointed at the in-ear monitor systems that were creating the problem. So while the FCC might not come out and fine you, and I really don't think the FCC wants to come out and fine churches and arts and entertainment, I can tell you that if you step on other services, which are now primary services, making us secondary services, that those corporations that have spent money on the spectrum will absolutely come out and will be protecting their spectrums. And all you could do at that point is turn off your transmitters and hope that they're nice guys. Because worst case is you get into a big argument, and then they will call the FCC, and you'll potentially get a fine. However, I do not believe the FCC will be out there trying to fine people or throw them in jail, particularly if it's just a small amount of negligence, maybe from a church that doesn't even know that they're not allowed to operate above 700 meg. And by the way, there are still plenty of microphones out there at 700 meg, and oddly enough, everyone that I've seen belongs to a broadcaster. So how's that? The people that are actually first licensed to operate the band happen to be the ones that are biggest offenders of the regulations. There are still plenty of news crews out there using wireless above 700 meg, and I have to tell them on the event that they're not authorized to use it and that it's not legal, and if Verizon comes in because they're getting stepped on, I'll know who to send them to. So I find that interesting that it is us, the regular folk here in American culture that are working so hard to abide by the rules. So there you have it.
Thanks, James. Barry Lashane asks again, I'm unclear as to the benefit of registering. So maybe a real simplified explanation of what registering provides you would be appropriate right now.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. What registration will provide is that if any white space portable devices come within 400 meters of your, whether it's a church or a performance venue, your venue that you've registered, your latitude and longitude, those devices will be instructed over the air to not transmit within the 6 meg chunk that you've requested reserved for your wireless microphones. That's what this registration does. If you don't register, then you are limited to 12 meg in the UHF band above 512. And if you can get all your mics inside that 12 meg, then that's great. Don't register. If you can't fit all of your wireless in the bands that the FCC has already allocated, the UHF to 6 meg chunks, 470 to 512, and VHF, if you still need more space to operate in because of your use of wireless mics or intercoms, then you need to register with the database, and what that does is it instructs all of the white space or TV band devices to stay out of your 6 meg chunk. And I'm slightly skeptical that it's going to work only because these devices will be consumer devices and that they will have intermod products that could spill into our band. So first you want to try to avoid white space device bands altogether, but if you absolutely have more wireless than you can fit into the bands that the FCC has allowed, then you go for the registration, which theoretically will protect us, and it'll tell, just like your cell phone, it'll tell your portable device to not transmit on the 6 meg chunk of spectrum that this person's wireless mic or intercom happens to occupy. And that's what it's all about.
Thanks. Rod Allen asks, would it be possible to have the IAS software incorporate the public safety channels?
Wow, Rod Allen too. We have a bunch of heavy hitters here. I hope I'm not putting out anything inaccurate. I'm really going to hear about this. Hello, Rod. Great question. I think that's one for Jason Eskew, who wrote the IAS software. I'm not officially connected, although I think that's a great idea. And I believe that Jason has already talked to some of these database administrators to include a feature where you do your free coordination on the IAS software, and then you can upload it to the database administrator. So I know Jason has been talking. I don't know that it's in this current version of the software. However, I'll certainly contact Jason here after we finish with the Q&A, and maybe we can post an answer on TC's website or something, or even add it to the canned portion of this webinar. We'll try to address some of these questions. I know it's in the works. I don't think it's done yet, though, Rob.
Right. Peter Erskine says, the IA software in the latest version, spectrum scans can be uploaded from TTI and a couple of other SA, spectrum analyzers. This is overlaid display at the bottom of the screen. So there's some information from Peter.
There you go, Peter Erskine too. Did you know, TC, that you have a who's who of the wireless industry on your webinar here?
Hey, James, I'm going to say that you have the who's who.
But yes, if you look at this overlay, I briefly mentioned this earlier where Jason incorporated this into his into the PWSIA software, and that is people like Pete, like Rod, like Andrew and I, we can actually take a TTI analyzer suite, we could send that file into Jason, and so that you'll be able to draw on these suites that real people did, not just some FCC library of what they think should be out there based on a contour of transmitters, but these are actual suites. You tell it that you're working in a certain city at a certain zip code, and Jason's software says, okay, well, the closest suite that anyone has done recently and sent me is from a half a mile away at this other performance venue, and now you can get a look at the real-world suite that someone else did, maybe even within the exact venue that you're operating in. So it's a great feature. I'm glad to see that he's implemented that, and we plan on taking advantage of it.
Peter also offers some more information He says there's an iPhone app called Whitespace that gives a list based on your location. So that's location of usable channels. So so that's interesting. So I guess we'll look up that iPhone app called Whitespace. I'm going to jump around here and say Peter also offers that the Audio-Technica SpectraPulse wireless, which are designed for conference rooms, are encrypted enough to be used by any government installation. So I guess there is a digital, so the SpectraPulse is encrypted enough to be able to use in most situations, or any government situation at least. So there's some more information from Peter. Thank you. We have a question from Byron Miller. Well, actually, it's a comment. FCC has a database of all the broadcasts that were reasonably easy to use. So people are helping us with the more information. Great. And Nathan Miller comments, ULXD has AES 256-bit encryption. And it is, in fact, encrypted. But if I'm not mistaken, James, can you comment on this? Any ULXD receiver can decrypt that. Isn't that true?
Well, yeah, I would imagine so. Unless Shure intentionally went out and said we have an encryption mode, and I don't recall from Gino's webinar whether that was the case or not.
Okay. Well, hang on. Some new information coming in here. Actually, the receiver and the transmitter have to handshake. So they are encrypted, and that is a special feature of the ULXD. So definitely.
There you go. So that's good to know, because that means that without that handshake, which I'm sure is a close-range procedure, someone can't just go out and buy a ULXD on the same frequency and be able to monitor, assuming you have encryption engaged, is what it sounds like.
It sounds like it too. So great. Our next one comes from Jeff Jones. How can you or can you license your wireless microphones that you own? He's talking about blocks G1, H4, J5, L3, electrosonics in various blocks, ZAX comms in various blocks, HME 800 RF comm, TR 100, GX4s, etc.
Yeah.
So how
okay. Right. Very good. Good question. Actually, in order to get an FCC license and operate under Part 74 rules instead of Part 15 rules, you need to first be either a broadcaster, a film production company, or you need, if you are, let's say, a larger house of worship, you might be able to get through by recording your services for later broadcast. So the trick is that the only way to obtain a Part 74 license and use that equipment and have the additional protection afforded by the FCC is that you have to be a television or radio broadcaster, a film production company or video production, or your operations and events have to be recorded for either then or later broadcast, and then you will be qualified. It would be very difficult for a Broadway theater, for example, to get an FCC license because that's an arts and entertainment venue that's not being broadcast on television. But the good news is that the FCC is not requiring that we get licensed. If you can stick to 50 milliwatts, which is the main caveat, the main difference between broadcasters being allowed a quarter watt and unlicensed 50 milliwatts, if you can live with that, then we really are getting much of the same protection and are certainly operating legally now. But if you absolutely are trying to seek an FCC license, which I believe is a Form 601, if I'm not mistaken, from the FCC, it's about $100 for the license, but you have to be a broadcaster or a film production company. If you're not, then it would be difficult, if not impossible, to get a license. If you want to drop me an email with your specific situation, then we'll take a look and see if there's some gray area that you might be able to pursue.
And also, James, let me point out that we can help people. There are actually consultants, you may know some of them, who can help you through the process. I guess it's not an easy process to become licensed by the FCC. There's a lot of navigation through forms and that kind of thing. And I do know that some folks hold themselves out, and we can steer you to those if you want to contact us if you're truly interested in becoming licensed. So, very good. Well, that wraps up our questions for today. I want to thank everybody who hung with us. We still have a lot of folks on the webinar. Our count is high, so that was a great thing. Just a quick reminder for our Chicago area attendees. On November 8th, we're hosting the Sennheiser Digital 9000 launch tour There'll be 2 events, one in the morning at ILC in Arlington Heights, one in the evening at Atwood Cafe in downtown Chicago at the corner of State and Washington. Sennheiser reps will be on hand demoing the new Digital 9000 system. So if you want some hands-on time and really get a look and a listen to what's going on there, we'd be happy to do that. And thanking everybody for taking the time to do that. James, do you have any final thoughts or comments you'd like to throw out there? Otherwise, we'll let everybody go home.
I would just like to say thank you for everybody for hanging in there. We went over an hour over time here, and I still see we have about almost 50 people listening, and I appreciate everyone's time. You have my personal info. Feel free to contact me at any time. And thank you, TC, for putting this very timely webinar together. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's our pleasure, and thanks so much, James, for all your expertise and your sharing and in the openness about every aspect of this extremely challenging time that we live in now. I'm especially impressed by the fact that you've boiled it down to under 4% of what we've had available spectrum-wise just a couple of years ago. So it's timely, it's important, and stay tuned for everybody to know that we're going to be doing a lot more webinars as in the coming months, specifically one on AVB. So stay tuned to your email and your TC Furlong Facebook page for more event announcements. So thanking everybody. Have a great day, and take all this information and put it to use. Take care.